Hello and welcome. My name is D.I. Jolly, I'm an author, and ultimately my goal is to bring more awareness to my books because I'm very proud of them and I want more people to know about them. So what I'm going to be doing here today is starting the read-through of Counting Sheep and Other Stories. Counting Sheep is a novel-length light science fiction thriller. The other stories are just there as padding, a little bit of bonus material at the end of the book for added value. And as soon as I find the page, I'll begin. Counting Sheep. Prologue. My name is Dr. Matthew Clayton. Together with my research partner and friend, Dr. Declan Mitchell, we created the Sleep Battery, a small device that literally stores up sleep. When the technology was originally created, much like the early medicine, mistakes were made. There was a lot of trial and error. Eventually, though, once all the kinks were worked out, it was revealed to the world. The sleep battery was a revolution in human civilization. Most of the world's governments approved it and paid the first batch of willing citizens within the prescribed age to be fitted with a port that connects to the part of the brain affected by sleep. From there, you'd get a little battery in a docking station, which you'd put next to your bed, then simply plug in when you went to bed. Once the small computer in the dock station decided that you had reached the optimal rest level, you'd start to charge the battery with sleep. As a child, my sister had always talked about how she wished she could store up extra sleep when she was bored, and then use it when more exciting things were happening, and I loved the idea, but the technology was more discovered than invented. I'd started out trying to create a device that would download your memories. The theory was, you would plug people in while they slept, download their dreams, and then play it back to them or something else later. Play it back to them or someone else later. We failed at getting any useful information. Occasionally someone would get flashbacks into what they were thinking or dreaming, but they would always be very faint. However, what we did discover was that when we plugged people back in, they felt recharged. It took some time and some more testing to fine-tune what we'd come to call swapping sleep. But we also discovered that it worked better with genetic matches. Somehow, the machine imprinted a genetic identity onto the sleep. This also meant that using your own sleep or the sleep of some close family member worked more effectively than if you used the sleep of someone else. It was like we'd found a door to a whole new world, a way of living, and the potential seemed limitless. My research partner and I won a Nobel Prize for our findings, and were recruited by what is now called Rest, the company that would turn sleep into a marketable commodity. When the CEO of Rest first approached us with the idea of selling sleep, it all sounded utopian. Coma patients could be turned back into contributing members of society, sleeping for a living. Death row became a thing of the past. Prisoners would be plugged into batteries and put to sleep. We could change the way the world worked. So we signed on the dotted line and were handed large sums of money to help set up and build sleep banks. People would come in, plug in, and sleep for a living. And for a time it was beautiful. The world seemed to speed up and slow down at the same time. Half the world stopped sleeping while the other stopped waking up. But things wouldn't stay that idyllic for long. People soon learned ways to force the machine to overload and cause a high. Rival companies started and collapsed, and regrettably some people died in the process. Press conferences were held, debates whether or not it was a blessing or a curse. Eventually the government drew up some rules. No children under the age of 7 could have the operation to have the port installed, and even then recommendations were issued to not allow anyone under 10 to use sleep. People were advised to engage in natural sleep at least once a week. Strict legal safeguards were put in place about who could sleep and how sleep banks were run. The common man off the street could no longer simply walk into a sleep bank, sign up. You had to have a reason to be there. Mostly terminally ill sufferers, coma patients, and criminals did the sleeping. All of the details, all of the business and bureaucracy going on around us, and all we ever had to do was sit in the background at TV events and press releases and occasionally answer the same asinine questions, pretending we walked around in pristine white lab coats all the time, because that's what scientists were supposed to look like. For years we'd continued to tell the public that it was all right, perfectly fine, no risk. Nothing bad was happening. There were small groups of people who didn't want the port installed and preferred to sleep naturally, which was fine. No one ever really cared about them. It made no difference to our lives. For the most part, it all seemed so surreal. We'd become world famous. Ironically, we were living the dream of anybody who wanted to grow up to be a scientist. We changed the world. As was expected, we had turned to chemicals to keep people in the banks asleep, we turned to chemicals to keep the people in the banks asleep for prolonged periods of time. We first tried to create a drug ourselves, but soon found a company that had the answer to all of our prayers. They promised us dreamless sleep with minimal side effects. For a time, everything was perfect. I married my girlfriend Isabel, and we had our first child, Jennifer. I was making enough money to support us and then some. Ultimately, I think it was boredom that made me start poking my nose around. When we started, I knew, without a doubt, that sleep was as good as we said, and we were doing the right thing the right way. Chapter 1. Next time.